On today's Locked On Bucks, it is almost the news we were all waiting for. An update on Khris Middleton's injury status for the game in Sacramento against the Kings, and also what's been working for the Bucks. It's really two names specifically that have really started to click. So we'll take a closer look at the Giannis, Damian Lillard actions that we've seen under Doc Rivers, and a look ahead at what is a very interesting schedule coming up for the Bucks. All of that after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia. You can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network, joined as always by Camille Davis, who you can hear on the Technical Foul podcast. And as of today, a busy time for you in two spots, Camille, with NFL free agency beginning on the Carry the G and MKE podcast as well. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and viewable on YouTube as well. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Camille, I suppose we'll start with what could be a big adventure for the Bucks and Khris Middleton in these next couple of days, potentially Tuesday in Sacramento. But the news that we got, late in the afternoon in the Bucks injury report submission, that Khris Middleton is listed as questionable on the injury report and not out for that game against the Sacramento Kings. It's been, I think 5 weeks. I think that game day will be 5 weeks to the day since that sprained ankle that he suffered against the Phoenix Suns. And we should preface with questionable typically means you don't play in that game, but just not seeing those three letters of O-U-T next to the name of Khris Middleton is what sparked a whole lot of optimism with a lot of Bucks fans.
Progress. It's progress. We've been hearing that Khris Middleton is close. He's close. He's close. Soon. But now to finally see on the injury report that it is no longer listed as out, like you said, but rather questionable. It means we're moving in the right direction. I saw that Eric Name tweeted out the fact that on Friday, Doc Rivers pointed out hey, we're going to put Khris through a really hard workout on Saturday. See how it goes. And then the report from that was, hey, everything went really well. He got some good work in. Things look like they're progressing the way that they should be. So to hear that report and then the very next day you see that now he's listed as questionable, it's getting me excited. I've been very vocal about me being a Big 22 supporter. Love Khris Middleton, have for a very long time. So seeing him back in the lineup personally, I get some joy out of that. And just thinking about what that means for the Bucks as well. It's hard not to be excited about Khris Middleton coming back into this Bucks team playing the way that they have been.
Yeah, and Doc himself had he said before the Lakers game, he was asked about Chris's status and availability, and asked too about the road trip and could we see him on Sunday, and he did say, yeah, it's a possibility, and followed up with that of Tuesday. Yeah, you got the sense Tuesday is much more possible than Sunday in Los Angeles, because he mentioned that workout that they were going to put him through on Saturday on the off day before that Clippers game. Again, with the designation as questionable, I know Giannis has played in games where he's been listed as questionable. It's a little bit different. It's not, it's, number one, that Giannis is a freak of nature, but I think between that and something that we'll get to a little bit later in the show as well, the schedule, I think he's going to play on Thursday against the 76ers is my inclination, because of the way the schedule sets up. Of you get a day off in between the Sacramento Kings game and then the Sixers game. You got to travel back home. But that game against the Sixers on Thursday starts a very interesting stretch for the Bucks that we'll get to a little bit later in the show. But because of what's baked in there with the off days, which is going to become a norm for the Bucks over the course of these next 2 weeks, basically. I think it seems like Thursday is when we're likely to see him on the floor. But as Doc Rivers promised, he's close. And I think it was before the Clippers game as well. Said, look, I know I've been saying that a lot. I know I keep saying he's close. What does that mean? I don't know. But promise, I promise you, trust me, guys, he is close. And we're making progress here. You've mentioned it before, too. Doc has gone as far as saying if this was a postseason game, I think Khris Middleton would play. So it does very much seem like, look, this is an incredibly important piece for our postseason hopes. We saw that for 2 years in injuries and what they can do to this team in the playoffs. Although, not to get too sidetracked, it is very funny now hearing more and more of the narrative that was not there a year ago from the national perspective that has suddenly shifted back to, well, if Giannis was healthy in that first round series, who knows where it goes, when those same people were saying it doesn't matter if Giannis was healthy or not. This Miami Heat team was going through the Bucks. But nonetheless, 2 years in a row that we've seen how important it is to be healthy for this team, and really 3 years when you think about the Brooklyn Nets team that they went up against in the postseason and everything else that happened throughout the course of the playoffs. Giannis returning from an injury. So health is very important, and really taking your time and making sure we have Khris Middleton for the playoffs. That above everything else is the most important thing for this group.
Absolutely. I mean, you hear Trae Young saying, if he didn't get hurt in 2021, the Hawks win that series against the Bucks, so on and so forth. But hey, everybody looks back on history and has a different view of things as time continues to pass. But for the Bucks, what is very clear to me about Khris Middleton returning, especially with Dame and Giannis's chemistry picking up, which I know that we mentioned we would kind of check in about, since me and you didn't get a chance to talk about that, is thinking about how those actions can also just set up Khris as somebody else who's a third man, either in the action or someone who's going to be able to benefit from the gravity that they create. Like hearing Dame and Giannis break down their two-man game and what they're looking for, and Dame being like, I noticed them playing me this way the entire game. And I was just like, I'm just going to continue to wait, because I know if we keep running this action, the way the defense plays are going to get a little bit tighter on us, and it's going to open up opportunities for somebody else along the way. And eventually, like, Brooke was able to get a really good shot off because of our actions. And I think about putting Khris Middleton in those situations. Like, I definitely get it from the bench perspective. I can't wait for Khris to get back for that as well, because these bench units are in dire need at times of having somebody who can create their own shot like Khris, as well as just play make and help set up other guys as well. So him coming back, it's just going to open up things so much for this team. We should probably get less Danilo Gallinari minutes, which at this point, I'm ready to say that's something that needs to be done. But hey, who knows? Doc might actually, keep playing him because that's his guy. But hopefully Khris Middleton's return means a few less minutes for Gallinari, as well as we continue to ramp up to get into playoff form when it comes to rotations.
I mean, you say that right as Danilo Gallinari knocks down his first shots as a member of the Bucks, Camille. I mean, he's on a heater in these last couple of games now. I know we mentioned that Giannis and Dame chemistry we'll get to, but we should just finish off the point on Khris Middleton and the schedule, and it kind of ties together. I think it's going to be Thursday that you see him back on the floor because of that questionable designation, and the fact that after that game against the 76ers on Thursday, you have 2 days off. Then you play once again at home against the Phoenix Suns. After that, you have 2 days off. Then you have a back-to-back, but I think it's safe for all of us to assume Khris is not going to play in both sets of a back-to-back going forward. He wasn't doing that early. I think he did it once this season. But you would have 2 days off. I would assume you would play him in the Boston game. Then you would have 3 days off if he did not play in the back end of the back-to-back. It's another set of 2 days off after that. And then you have a game against the Thunder. So if you just stretch it out one more game and say, look, we think he's 95%. Let's wait until he's 100%. And by the way, if he's 100% on Thursday, we also get a ton of time off with the way this schedule is broken out. That's been the good and the bad of this schedule for the Bucks. It does not let up at all in terms of the caliber of opponents that are on there, although they have dropped from third most difficult schedule down to fourth
Hey,
overall.
now.
So that's somewhat of the positive. But it's still tough opponents that you have. But now for the next, 10 days, you got a lot of rest on that schedule.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good point to consider. I mean, with Chris Middleton, we know they're going to look to ramp his minutes up. They're not going to throw him back out there with him playing the 30 minutes a game that he was before he got injured. And not even just because of the ankle itself. That's part of why this has been taking so long, because when he gets back on the court, they want to make sure the ankle is no longer a problem, making sure that all of the swelling is done, making sure that he's going to have all his mobility back, so on and so forth. But the minute restriction and ramping him up is more so about his conditioning and making sure that he's going to be able to play those big minutes, have the lungs to do so come playoff time. Because as we know, we're getting closer to that time. We only have 17 games left or something like that at this point.
Mhm.
So it's really getting to that time where rotations are going to start to shrink, and you're going to start seeing what a playoff rotation might look like, so guys can get used to the minute load. Because one thing we know about Doc is that he is going to play his guys in the playoffs. They're going to get the big minutes. So you need him to get his conditioning up, and as well as just get used to playing with this team, with the direction that Doc wants to coach it in. Like, it's been some changes since he last played on February 6th with this team and how they play now. I mean, the Giannis and Dame chemistry is the focal point of this offense right now. That two-man game is the focus of this offense, and other actions come from that. So Chris is going to have to also figure out exactly how he fits in with the way that they're playing now, and develop his chemistry as well, so that he can also get on that page where in game things just feel natural, and it's not like okay, my turn, you've had the ball, like, let me get a shot now, and just figuring all of that out as well.
It's going to help a lot with the offense to have Khris Middleton back out there, and the ripple effects too of what we're going to get into coming up after the break, and that is the Giannis and Damian Lillard pairing. But even some of the things that you mentioned as well, whether it be Danilo Gallinari, even Jay Crowder, the way that you distribute the minutes once Khris Middleton is back out there will be an interesting thing for Doc Rivers to examine as we start to move forward. So we'll get into that conversation, the Giannis and Damian Lillard two-man game, what we've seen from that duo really since the All-Star break, and how it's suddenly lifted this Bucks offense that was catching a lot of daggers for the last couple of weeks. We'll discuss coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Well, this next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to somebody who's unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something, and you may even be thinking the same thing this week. It's what we just alluded to. This Bucks offense continues to take some daggers. It hasn't been bad, folks. When you look at the way they've performed in the half court, we're starting to see the overall offensive rating lift in games played since the All-Star break. A lot of that is a product of the work that Doc Rivers has put in with Giannis and with Damian Lillard. And it's the same type of work that we can all put in on ourselves. Therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off of your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It is now available on Amazon Fire TV as well in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with the local experts you've come to expect from Locked On, plus all of our national shows that get into each and every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. The offense, Camille, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and it's been the look. We need to see Khris Middleton is the number one caveat that we've all put out there of it's just going to change things, right? Like Jay Crowder's another player that has come under criticism for some of his lack of shot making that we've seen really since the All-Star break. His minutes, Jay Crowder being the person that gets those open kicks, that changes and gets reduced when you have Khris Middleton back on the floor. When you think about the spacing, when you have that two-man game, and Giannis and Dame, as we'll get to, are clearly getting, not fully there, but getting much more comfortable in those situations. When you got Khris Middleton sitting in one corner, Malik Beasley in the other, Brooke Lopez is maybe number 5 in terms of guys that you're going to say, okay, we'll let him take the shot. That changes a lot, too, in how you can defend this team. So the way that duo in Giannis and Dame have been playing and seem to really be starting to gel coming out of the All-Star break, that to me is just as important, but it's especially huge to have that start to take off as you're going to reintroduce Khris Middleton.
Yeah, absolutely. And given the fact that Khris Middleton's shooting nearly 38% from 3 on the season, and I believe if you look at that number just coming out of January 1st until now, is an even higher percentage than the actual season average for Khris. So one hope is that when he comes back, the 3-point shot hasn't completely deserted him when he comes back and he's getting back into rhythm, because we've seen with Jay Crowder since he's returned from injury, like you mentioned, since All-Star break, hasn't been great. But for being honest, it hasn't been great shooting really since he came back from his injury, which is unfortunate. No way in like did I really think he was going to continue to shoot like 50% from 3.
50+%, yeah.
Yeah, like he was previously to the injury, but him shooting in the mid 20s, low 20s, that's a concern. Like you want to see that at least 10% higher. You want to see him, mid to high 30s at minimum with that 3-point shot. So what we've been getting hasn't been great, but the defensive effort has from Jay. So it's not like he's a net negative when he's on the court, but when you think about those drives and those kicks that you can get off of those actions, you want to have a shooter out there, which is why the AJ Green minutes have been interesting. And seeing him be able to be that young guy that cracks the rotation, so to speak, even though it's not like he's getting, mega minutes or anything like that. But of the young guys we've been talking about throughout the season with AJ, with Marjan, with Ajax, normally the conversation was around Marjan and Andre Jackson Jr. because, we said, hey, team needs defense. These are the guys that seem equipped to do it. But we knew the whole time that AJ Green had a set of skills, very dangerous skills, the ability to shoot the ball really well from 3. So him being able to stretch the field, the floor out that way has been great too. So again, you think about Khris Middleton coming back in a lineup and what that does. And when you're thinking about how they get to those actions, like we mentioned, it's the heart of it is going to be that Dame and that Giannis 2-man game. I loved hearing how the two of them talked about it after the Clippers game and getting more insight to how things have been going and how they've been able to develop that chemistry, because Doc Rivers clearing out the court and making the two of them just run actions by themselves for 15 seconds straight. Okay, now someone shoot, do it over. Like in practice, yeah, we're laughing because it feels weird. Like you feel like you're getting singled out. It's just this happening at the moment and everyone's watching it. But like you see in that Clippers game, it's starting to synchronize between the two. And it's looking more like two guys who are learning how to play off each other. And Dane mentioned it, like we're starting to understand where to put the other guy in order to take advantage of the defense. Like you're seeing that now more so than it being two superstars saying, hey, my turn, your turn, and going back and forth. So that chemistry, that synergy, having that starting to develop now as we're getting ready to head into the playoffs, I love to see it coming together.
Yeah, and look, if we're going to be fair, as much as there was, I think there was more positives in that Giannis and Dame pairing than there were negatives over the weekend, but there were some negatives, and largely that came Friday night. And Doc Rivers was quick to point out after the game too, we did a lot of good things, and I think you even pointed to the late game possessions in those final minutes in both of the games. Giannis and Dame with their touches and how much that created offense for the Bucks in those two spots. But there were some areas where they fell a little short. And as Doc Rivers said after the game against the Lakers, I think it was 2 out of 5 sideline out of bounds plays that we ran coming out of timeouts. We didn't execute on it. And we guys didn't know what to do, and guys ran the wrong play, and we kind of left it out there on the floor. And you can't do that in the playoffs. You can get away with it. I know we didn't tonight, but you can get away with it at times in the regular season. You can't in the playoffs. And these are the things when Doc Rivers continues to say, look, it's great that we're winning. We're not there yet. And we got to keep getting better and we got to keep figuring this out. Those are the things that he's alluding to. But again, the progress that this team has made along the way is the encouraging part. And I think that's what Doc has continued to hammer home as well, is we're not there, but I see the signs that we're going to get there, and we keep getting better. We keep seeing things that are going to work. And we've talked about it on this show quite a bit. When Doc Rivers took over, there were two very clear things that were the initiatives for Doc Rivers, and I'm sure for the organization as a whole, that it was just trickling down, is fix our defense, right? We're not expecting us to be a top 5 defense, but fix the defense. We cannot be 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
And look, we put a lot of our eggs in this Damian Lillard basket. I'm not going to say he's been bad, and I don't think anybody in the organization would say that. I wouldn't say he's been bad. You wouldn't say he's been bad.
No.
Some Bucks fans have said that, but he's not bad. He's maybe not being the guy you anticipated you would get, but there's a lot that goes into it. So the other big initiative, Doc, is get Damian Lillard to be as close as he can to the guy that he was in Portland. He's not going to be that guy in Portland when he's playing on a team with Giannis and Antetokounmpo, right? But we need him to be very close. We need him to be 80% of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you've consistently started to see since the All-Star break. I think it's a number of things, the play calls, some of the things that Dame has talked about and things that they've worked at that Doc has drilled into these guys in practice, and specifically Giannis and Dame. But, I remember when we did a show after the All-Star game too, talking about that conversation that Shaq had with Damian Lillard. I think it's things like that too. When you get a little bit of time away, you get to not hit the reset button, but you get a little bit of rest and you get to just kind of clear your head and say, okay, here's how we're going to attack and approach these final 28 games, whatever it was coming out of there. I think it's all of these things that have just converged, and we've seen a much different version of Dame. I mean, I hesitate to say we've seen a much different version of Giannis, because by the numbers, he's been as good and efficient as he was pre-All-Star break. But for Dame especially, 42% on his threes. That was a lot of the chatter going into the break, is, man, when are we going to see this consistent version of Dame? I know it's just 9 games, but he's shooting 42% on threes. He's 94% at the free throw line. He's 45% from the field. And he just looks like he's picking his spots much more. It's not that he's overpowering people with his point production. It's relatively even to where it was before the All-Star break, but his presence, I think, has been felt a lot more in these games coming out of the break.
I love that you brought up the Shaq comments again from All-Star, because it just made me start thinking about all the things I've heard since then that kind of support that theory of like, hey, this is your team, Giannis's team, and Doc. Like, that's the 3 guys who names are going to be all over this. Yeah. I think about that comment from Shaq saying, like, you 3 have to get together and own this situation and have everybody else fall in line thereafter. I think about what Pat Beverly mentioned on his podcast, where he said, like, hey, I want Dame to be shooting all of these shots. And sometimes in the playoffs, when, we get to that time, what you're going to see is that the star guys are going to be taking 25 shots a game. And there might be some guys on the bench saying, why are you going G with the ball right now? But the reality of it is that's what they're supposed to do. And as role players, we have to understand that and pretty much get in where we fit in, because the offense is going to be driven by the stars. I think of Giannis post game of the Clippers, where he's saying, like, the ball has energy. We want everybody to touch the ball. We want people to be involved in the game. But the reality of it is, in the last 6 minutes or so of the game, the ball is going to be in Dame's hand, and we're going to be running our actions. And that's the way that it's going to go pretty much. And like, our teammates have enough trust in us that we're going to make the right decision in those moments. So I love hearing how it seems like these guys really are taking ownership of it. Doc, he's been straightforward, transparent, saying exactly how he feels since he got here. So he already, was doing his part and taking ownership of the situation. But hearing other players on the team, hearing Dame, hearing Giannis just coming together about, hey, here's how this is going to go, what we're understanding, roles, be a star in it, and we're getting comfortable in that.
And I know I mentioned too before the break of, people could harp on where the Bucks were in terms of their offensive rating. I think if we just look at the overall performance, I believe they're 10th best defensively since Doc Rivers took over. So it's what we had been pointing to for a while now, is that, look, this defense has shown you consistently they're not a 21st, 22nd, wherever it was at the time that the coaching change was made. That's not who they are, that they've consistently moved further away from that and have been, for what, 20 plus games, basically. They've been more like a top 10 defense than they have a bottom 10 defense. The offense was what everybody was kind of scratching their heads over of, yeah, but this offense has kind of switched places with the defense and dropped down to, I think it was 17th or 18th at the time. The offensive started to move upward. I think it was around 15th since Doc Rivers took over, which again, you need Khris Middleton back on the floor to solve a lot of that. But I kept pointing to half court offense still in the top 10 since Doc Rivers took over. Offensive rating may be down there, but the half court, where it's more important in the playoffs, what you brought Damian Lillard for, it's in the top 10 since you made this coaching change. And since the All-Star break, it's the 6th best half court offense in the league. And again, you look back at the way they closed out the Clippers game and some other performances, and that speaks to what they're getting there. I would imagine it's only going to enhance and increase once you get Khris Middleton back on the floor. But, the other thing that I think we should point out, which, is a credit, I suppose, to the players, also to Doc Rivers, is the Bucks now have a league average defense for the season as a whole. They're at 15th. You and I talked about this at the time too, of, make the best of it, essentially, was the approach of, look, you're not going to crack this number. So as long as what you see in games played since this date is good, you can live with that. Well, now you may be able to crack that number. That is not inconceivable to think that the Bucks could finish the season with a defense somewhere around 12th or 11th with the climbs that they have already made and how close they are to the rest of the pack. So that is another thing that I don't know. It's the interesting spot of, boy, I don't know if this is credit to Doc Rivers or if this is more of, man, what was going on those first 43 games?
Yeah, that's a great point to point out how far the defense has climbed during this time just as a whole, because we have been looking at it in segments where it's like, okay, since the coaching change, the Bucks have been this. Before the coaching change, the Bucks were this. But to see where they are as a whole, with the understanding of where they were before the coaching change, that's impressive. That's what you want to see heading into the playoffs. That's the progress that we're talking about that you want to see this team making.
A lot of progress has been made, and we've seen that on the courts, and now we're starting to see it in the standings as well. These last couple of games, potential to get even more help in the next couple of days. We'll take a look at the Eastern Conference outlook after this on Locked On Bucks. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone, because Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Or you could choose the 2024 Nissan Armada. It'll change the way you expect a full-size SUV to perform. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right, Camille, as we wrap things up here, the Bucks, we mentioned, moved into second place in the Eastern Conference. That came on Sunday when we saw the Cleveland Cavaliers lose The Bucks win, so they pulled tied or pulled even in the loss column and were ahead with one more win. But now today, the Cavaliers, who we should point out have been dealing with a number of injuries, and that's been the story for a lot of teams behind the Bucks. No Joel Embiid, all the injuries that the New York Knicks are dealing with. The Cavaliers, I believe this was their 5th straight game played without Donovan Mitchell and 3rd or 4th now without Evan Mobley. But all these teams are starting to deal with injuries. The Bucks are now taking advantage. So they are now 1 game up on the Cavs in the loss column and a full game up in the overall standings at 42-23 and the Cavs 41-24. Cavs have a matchup with the New Orleans Pelicans on Wednesday as well. And New Orleans, they have been as hot as anybody in the Western Conference. I believe they own the longest win streak in the Western Conference now. A team the Bucks will play in the very near future. They've moved all the way up to 5th. So if you win, and I know this is a lot of ifs and looking ahead, which are 2 things you should never do, but if you beat the Sacramento Kings and if the Cavaliers lose to the Pelicans, the Bucks will now be 2 games. If that happens, we'll be 2 games up on the Cavaliers in the loss column and in the standings, and it'll be with 16 games left. Again, divisional tiebreaker is going to be important, so you still need the Cavaliers to lose both those games against the Indiana Pacers. But if you start to build up a lead, that's going to be a little less important, is getting that tiebreaker in divisional play.
You love to see it. You don't love to see the injuries. Let me be very clear about that. But you do love to see the Bucks making up ground in the standings. And given the fact that, coming into this road trip, we had a conversation about, hey, what would this record have to be for it to be successful? And I think a great road trip would be 3-1.
Yeah.
And we still have the game in Sacramento to play, but hopefully the Bucks win that one. If they do, they come out of the road trip 2-2, which is all right. Like, generally speaking, you want to try to win at least half your games on the road, and you want to win, a lot more at home. You want to have a very good home record and try to split on the road. So at the bare minimum, like, it's okay. Like, this is fine. It just hurts a little bit more with that Lakers game because you had it in your hands and you let it slip away. So that's why it's like, I don't want to sound like, 2-2, it's nothing, but and again, that's assuming a win against Sacramento, but that Lakers loss, that's one that sticks with you. But the Bucks do get to see the Lakers soon. They're coming to Milwaukee in a matter of weeks here. So they'll get a chance to get that revenge game in, so to speak. But looking at the standings and what's going on, this is why you continue to just play what's in front of you. And the Bucks have had pretty good injury luck throughout the season. Like, the biggest main injury before this Khris Middleton ankle sprain was the Jay Crowder injury that took him out for, a month or a month and a half or so, something like that. So that's been the biggest injury for this team. And you knock on wood and hope that nothing else comes up with them and they continue to get healthier as they come towards that playoff push and with the remaining schedule that they have, because you have Sacramento, you finish that California road trip up, you come home to play Philly, like we said. Then you have Phoenix. Kevin Durant's been playing some really good ball over his last few games. I saw he had like 37 tonight as well, sending a streak of 35 points in straight games. I think he's like at 3 or 4 straight games now. So he's feeling really good. And then you have the Boston game, which is always going to be a big game here with Bucks and Celtics, given where they are in the standings and given their history as well. And that game is in Boston on ESPN. Another chance to help make that MVP case for Giannis as well. Then, you have Brooklyn, you have the Thunder, you have the Lakers, like mentioned, Pelicans, Hawks. Like, there's a lot of different things going on. So you have to stay focused on your schedule. The Bucks, hey, they take it a game at a time. We on Locked On Bucks get to have this foresight and look ahead about how things might look if things go certain ways or they don't. But we know the Bucks have a tough schedule, 4th toughest in the league remaining. The Cavaliers are middle in the pack. I believe they're 15th toughest. So right there in the middle, you're looking at that race for the 2 seed. Like, it's going to be on, but the Bucks are in better shape than what I thought they could be in at this point.
They're in much better shape than I thought they would be at this time. I had said I thought they were going to finish 3rd. It is by no means sealed, right? That you're just a game up on the Cavs, and all the scenarios we went through are still a lot of ifs that need to happen. it's still, to me, going to come down to those two games the Cavaliers have against the Indiana Pacers that determines who gets second and who gets third. Health, too, is going to be the big part of it. But again, I've said this elsewhere, it does not matter to me. It's not important where the Bucks are at 2 or 3. What's important is that the Bucks are 2 or 3 and don't slide down to 4. And that's the other big piece is Sunday was arguably the best day you could have asked for, that every single team outside of the two teams, who the Pacers and the Sixers, who played other playoff teams, every other playoff team in the East that played lost besides the Bucks. So you got that help against the Cavaliers, but perhaps more importantly, the Knicks lost to the 76ers. So you're currently 4 games up on the Knicks in the loss column. You do hold the head-to-head tiebreaker with 1 game left against the Knicks. Doesn't matter what happens in that game. They can't win the tiebreaker over you. So you're essentially 5 games up on the Knicks. That's a whole lot of ground to make up in the amount of games, 17 left for the Bucks. So especially if you win tonight, whenever it is you listen to this, in Sacramento against the Kings, and the Knicks play same night, game 2 in their 2-game set, home and home with the 76ers. If you win and the Knicks lose, I know I caution, don't look ahead and don't get into all the ifs. But Camille, if that scenario does unfold, I am willing to call it that the Bucks will not slide lower and will not fall down to where the Knicks currently are. Again, it's a lot of ifs, but that's the important part that we've seen these last couple of games and weeks is injury's a big part of it, but what is happening around the Bucks, really clearing that path for this team to make sure they finish on that 2 or 3 line. And we should point this out as well. You got to beat good teams in the playoffs. So this isn't a matter of, man, get the easiest path possible. That's not possible, right? Like, you got to beat good teams. You shouldn't be worried about ducking teams, but you don't want to face the closest thing to a guarantee that we've seen so far in the Eastern Conference in the Boston Celtics. You want to prolong that as much as you can. So if it means you'll see them in the conference finals, fine. But the 4 seed is a guarantee. If we advance to the second round, pretty good chance we're playing the Boston Celtics. Now, in terms of the rest of well, what about this? And what about your seeding with this team? It is way too early to get caught up on any of that, because right now 4 through 8 is separated by, I think, just 2 games. Yep. So literally any of those teams, the Knicks, the Magic, the Sixers, the Pacers, and the Heat, regardless of where the Bucks finish, if it's second, third, even if they slide to 4th, they could play any of those teams. And I don't think there is a clear outcome right now. So to me, the big part is just keep doing what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it's 3 and the Cavs get to 2, especially if the Cavs get to 2. As long as you avoid 4, that's the big thing. And the Bucks have done everything possible to make sure that is what's going to happen here coming out of the All-Star break.
I'm glad you touched on the we not ducking smoke aspect of it, because that's going to be my closing thoughts for this episode. Like, when I'm talking about the seeding race and how I want the Bucks to finish second, or thinking like, hey, best case scenario, Bucks could finish second. I know some people are like, well, couldn't they finish first? And I'm like, technically, yes, they could, but I'm not sure how likely that is. But 2 or 3, I want them to have the home court advantage. Ideally, in a dream world for me, Eastern Conference Finals is Milwaukee and Boston. Like, that's the setup that I want. I want that to be main event viewing in the Eastern Conference. And in order to do that, like, for this is all it's personal. Like, this is exactly why I want it this way. I wanted main event viewing for Milwaukee and Boston. Finishing 2 or 3 helps make that a more likely scenario. I don't want that matchup early, but it's not about ducking smoke or anything like that. I want them to make sure that they have home court. And if they seed Boston, I want it to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's me. I got random Celtics fans in my mentions now, Justin. I don't even talk about the Celtics. I don't know how they even found me, Justin. They're coming for me. So I need it. I need it to be main event.
Well, and I suppose famous last words here, and I'll add this. I only mean it under this sense. It does it not, Camille? Is it just me, or does it not seem like this is going to be the 3rd time in 4 years the Bucks are going to get the Miami Heat in the first round? It just seems like any way you slice it, everything we've looked at, it's been The Heat are that team that's lurking. They were going to be in the play-in tournament, that they moved up to 5th at one point. Now they're back in the play-in mixture, but it just seems like it's inevitable that it's going to be another Bucks Heat first round matchup. So right now they're 8th, 7 plays 8. The winner of that game is the 7 seed. The loser is still alive for the 8 seed. But the Pacers and the Heat are 7 and 8 right now.
Either
It
one.
just seems like, you know what? This is the team that the Bucks always play in the playoffs, is the Miami Heat. And look, if you want to be an optimist instead of being afraid and saying, well, look what the Heat did to this Bucks team last year. If you want to point to a reason why you'd want to play the Heat, it's, well, historically, when these two teams play in the playoffs, the winner of that series goes on to represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. So at least we'll know early if you're done, or hey, we won and we're going to the NBA Finals.
Bring it on, whether it's Miami or it's Indiana. Either way it goes, that would be such a sweet first round matchup. Just the narratives. The Miami Heat put you out last year. You get to see them again this year. The Pacers talking. They won the season series, so you know how that goes. Teams are completely different now than they were when they last saw each other. A scheduling quirk with them being done with each other in their season series at the beginning of January. So either way, I want it. I'm cool with either option.
Look, what, 5 weeks? I think 5 weeks left in the regular season, so still a lot of time. I'm just saying it feels like what we always get with the Bucks and the Miami Heat in the first round. As we wrap up here, I know it's Locked On Bucks. We should also point out, Camille, congratulations are in order to the team. One of the 2 collegiate teams in our city, the Milwaukee Panthers, have advanced to the finals of the Horizon League tournament. So I believe that game's going to tip off just before the Bucks and the Kings. So a chance to get a double dip of basketball for Milwaukee basketball fans tomorrow, and see if the Milwaukee Panthers can advance to the NCAA tournament. But we will keep our eyes peeled on the injury report tomorrow, see if there's any updates to Khris Middleton. Again, listed as questionable, which you got to celebrate the small things. And to see Khris Middleton upgraded from out to questionable is one of those things to celebrate after what we've seen these last 5+ weeks. We will be back with the post-game show. Maybe it'll be a live show. It'll probably come your way Wednesday morning. But we'll be back with the post-game show following the Bucks and the Kings, hopefully breaking down yet another Bucks win and a 500 road trip, and maybe, just maybe, the return of Khris Middleton. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow with Locked On Bucks.